Hello, this is Heath Kirkendall recording a short reflection for the Race, Power, and Politics and Education class for you, Dr. Johnson. So hope you enjoy this. I will say I tried recording this once before and I noticed I got into about 12 minutes of rambling. And I realized that was probably a little too long. So I'm going to try to keep it a little more concise and short, towards 7-8 minutes. I don't want you to have to sit and listen to me talk for too terribly long. So I want to discuss primarily some of my responses to the debate that we had, some of the texts in relationship to that debate, and then I'd also like to discuss the Plessy v. Ferguson and the Dred Scott v. Sanford decisions that we discussed, and what those have started to kind of generate the thoughts that they put into my head. So first and foremost, on the debate. I love the debate that we did. I haven't done a good academic debate in a long time, and that was it was wonderfully fun, and it was a great topic. I went into it wanting to actually be on the other side of it, on the fortifying the individual, but balanced over to the fortifying the country to make the class even. And I will say I walked away from that like fully convinced by my classmates that this was the side to be on. Everyone in America deserves a baseline education, something that they can find commonality in, something that helps bind them together. As we saw in the text for both Mexican American communities building up their schools in the conquered territories, and then also looking at the text over the achievement gap that discussed how other gaps were closed by African American communities working on building their own schools, creating their own education system in many ways. I think what those texts showed is that education is very often a bedrock of the community. It is what people gather around. People care about their children. They want their children to have a good, strong future, and education is the way to get that. In which case, people use it as the foundation. Churches, schools, these become those primary community centers. And sometimes they were the same place, even if we're discussing some of those older institutions. And I'm sure even to this day, we still have similar things like that. I say that as if Sunday schools don't exist, of course, but I think something that I also felt from the debate that I thought was wildly interesting to me was just the argument from the individual side on if we build up the individual students, they will grow to care about education and they will grow to want to make education better and thus help change it. To me, that is such a selfish point. It doesn't sound it, but hear me out. It is passing the buck off to them. Yes, we are educators. Yes, we could be working to make a change. But instead, I will work only to change my immediate students, and maybe someday they will change the system. I mean, why don't we try? Why don't we give it a shot? Why don't we do the macro work? If our goal as teachers is to make our children's lives better and to give them brighter futures, then we cannot simply say, I will focus just on you and then you will make the brighter future for the next generation. We must say, you are the next generation that I must make the brighter future for. And that means changing the world in grand ways. We often, I think, give up on those macro items. It's harder. It's easier to do the micro stuff. I can sit down with one kid and I can work with him and I can become a teacher, a friend, whatever he needs to make sure that he gets where he needs to go. I can help him out. But it's harder to say for all 60 plus of my students, I'm going to be radically restructuring curriculum and I'm going to be talking with a bunch of principals and the superintendent to reset the way that we look at testing and how we deal with our grades and our data, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, for some of us, it's impossible. But I don't want us to say that. I want us to feel like it is possible. We have seen it before. Look at those two texts that I just mentioned there. We have seen those changes being made. Communities have strived to build education. They have strived to build themselves up and to make the world better for their children, and they have succeeded. We're at another point in time where the progress has slowed, where the future seems like it's hard to grasp and we might not ever reach it. But if people who were freed from slavery with no money, no education, and no idea where to go next, if those people could build up an entire system for themselves, could increase their literacy rates, increase their community standing, their wealth, and they could do that so quickly, and they could work hard to change the world around them, even while everything else around them was trying to put them down. I mean, if people can fight those odds and win, why can't we right now? And I know, of course, win there is subjective. I mean, we're talking about, Reconstruction South, leading right into the Jim Crow South. Winning there is it's doing a lot of work in that sentence. But they did succeed. They did make their world a better place. They did make their future brighter for their children. And they continue to do so with every generation. We need to continue that fight. We need to continue that work at the macro level. You can't ignore the micro, but focusing too hard on the micro lets the macro continue to run right over everyone and ruin society. Macro needs to come next. All right, that's what I want to stick with for there. I think that it was overall a wonderful discussion. I wish I'd been able to ask the other side, hey, aren't we already focusing on the individual? Don't we already do this? Like, aren't we already at a point where we're stretched too thin and we don't have the teachers' time and resources to actually make this work? Shouldn't we be building towards that macro? I didn't get to ask that question. I wish I did. Maybe I'll get a chance at some other point. So, the other thing I want to discuss, of course, are those two cases, those two Supreme Court cases we discussed. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest lecturer. He did a phenomenal job. It's one of the best lectures I've had in college, just period. So, thoroughly enjoyed myself every moment of it. So, I will say one thing that these have affected me actually. I've really gotten into listening to Supreme Court cases and case law now. It's just really fascinating. It's not something I know about. I want to learn more. I'm listening to a lot of podcasts and whatnot that are focusing on education law and how the Supreme Court has dealt with education. I think the last big one I listened to was Ingram versus Wright, the case that said students do not have Eighth Amendment rights, which, man, I mean, the idea that students don't have a right, again, to not be treated with cruel and unusual punishment, I mean, man, that really harkens back to some pretty dark times in American history. The idea that, yeah, we can beat you and hurt you to keep you in line. I mean, it's little telling of the conservative justices in that case that they decided, yeah, a system, corporal punishment, which mostly abuses minority children, we'll keep that in place. That's something that we need. I mean, in a way, it just feels like the setup for prison, And I mean, that's almost how they worded it. There's the start of the school to prison pipeline right there. Beat your children in school so that they're ready for it later on, And just overall disgusting. And it's really made me think as well about, how do I treat my children in the classroom? I really do try my best to just not raise my voice, try to be fair with everything. I will get exasperated with them, but try to make sure that we're still moving along. And, every now and again, that doesn't work. I fail. I yell. I tell them to, sit down, get to it, and I don't treat them in the fair way I need to. That's something I need to be working on further. And it's something that this has made me think about. So, but back to the actual cases themselves. I think I learned so much there, especially on the Dred Scott v. Sandford from reading it. Again, like I mentioned in class, I had always just been taught, oh, well, it's saying, you can't be freed from slavery just because you go to a state where it isn't. And I was like, man, that's horrible. I mean, that's how it should work. But to really read it and to understand fully, no, this case was trying to unequivocally say African American people do not have rights or citizenship and were never intended to. I mean, when you look at a lot of the more recent Supreme Court cases where they keep citing history, America's historical precedent, I mean, it really takes you back to this, doesn't it? Well, the history of our country is that black people haven't had the right to vote, so therefore they shouldn't, and they shouldn't be citizens. As if history is the defining factor there, as if we have to give in to whatever came before and just say, yep, that was the right way to do it, can't ever change it. It's really gotten me thinking about where the country's going to go next, and what do I need to be telling my children, you know? We got to talk about Justice Sonia Sotomayor the other day for Hispanic Heritage Month, and I made the point of saying, you know, how strong a justice she is, not just for, you know, her historic, you know, appointment, but just for the fact that she stands up for individual rights so frequently. And at the same time, I felt bad telling my kids all that, because she also recently made that, you know, opinion or giving a ruling there for Yeshiva University that no, you don't have to recognize that LGBTQ group. And then when eventually the court decided in general, no, you do have to listen to the lower courts and do, but here's a roadmap for how to get around it eventually. And Sotomayor was on that, you know, it makes you... How do I tell my children what they need to know about the legal system, how America's legal system prioritizes certain people over others, disenfranchises many of them, and then proceeds to say, you can't bring it up in the court of law, and we're going to keep hurting you. We're going to keep pulling you down as many times as we can. How do I tell them what they need to know about that system without fundamentally breaking their ideas of what America is? Many of my kids are first generation. Their parents moved here from Mexico or Honduras or Puerto Rico. And for them, you can see the way they talk that they consider themselves of two places. You know, they are both Americans, but maybe not in name, and they are Hispanic, Mexican, whatever other label they put to themselves. And I worry that how do I tell them the truth, what they need to know about these cases, about the world around them, about the country that they live in, without breaking the spirit that they have, without breaking the idea of, well, I can succeed and this will function. I went to a TFA meeting over the weekend, and one of my fellow teachers there said, it's hard, how do I as a white person teach the black kids in my room about slavery when I was, you know, people like me were the ones who were doing it? And that's a question I still don't know the answer to. And I'm not a social studies teacher. Maybe to a degree I don't have to answer it the same way. But I am a reading and writing teacher, and we're going to read and write about Frederick Douglass, about Langston Hughes, about many people who look and sound so much different than I am, and people whose experiences I'll never quite understand. I think through reading cases like this, through reading about the systemic oppression of these groups in our country, it's the bare minimum to begin to better understand what my students have been through and what they will almost certainly go through their lives, and to begin that work to make things better. And I realize, again, I'm starting to ramble, and I think at this point I should probably cut it off before I go any further. I realize that a lot of this has just been very woo all over the place, so I hope I have shown or demonstrated to you that I have really enjoyed this first section of the class. I'm so excited for where to go from here. You know, all the other classmates, they're wonderful. I love the discussions with them, and I can't wait to continue on. This is a great opening, setting up the history for us, giving us the background for what we need, and starting to make us consider how are we going to apply it to our classroom, knowing that this is what the history is. I'm still struggling to really figure out the answer to that, but it's something I'll continue to work on. So thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for listening to this. I hope it's not too long. If it is, skip around. I'm sure it'll be fine. All right. I'm going to go ahead and shut it off, so thank you again.